What if the girl everyone mocked in the interview turned out to be the billionaire's wife? She walked in wearing a modest outfit, no designer bag, no impressive title, just grace and a calm presence. The candidate smirked when she introduced herself. Some whispered, others dismissed her entirely. One even offered her a pen like she didn't belong. They laughed when she hesitated, rolled their eyes when she said she was just there to observe. But everything changed when the glass doors opened and the CEO himself stepped into the room. He didn't look at the directors. He didn't acknowledge the executives. He walked straight to her, placed his hand gently on her shoulder, and said one word that silenced everyone. Wife. And just like that, the woman they treated like no one became the only one that mattered. But what happened after will leave the entire room, and maybe you, speechless. The automatic glass doors slid open with a whisper as she stepped inside. Her shoulders slightly hunched, her shoes scuffed, and her beige blouse pressed but aged. Nobody looked up, not the receptionist tapping furiously at her keyboard, not the security guard flipping through his phone behind the desk. The girl walked quietly, eyes searching the signs on the wall until she found the arrow that read Human Resources 23rd Floor. As she waited for the elevator, a man in a tailored suit brushed past her, barely missing her shoulder. "Delivering in the back," he muttered without glancing. She opened her mouth to correct him, then closed it. The elevator dinged, and she stepped inside alone. The 23rd floor was glass and chrome, and voices too loud for comfort. Two interns glanced up from their desks and snickered. One whispered, "Did someone's nanny take the wrong elevator?" She walked past without flinching. Her name was Naomi, though no one asked. Her resume was real, though no one checked. And her purpose was not what they assumed. At the reception desk, a woman in red lipstick looked her up and down. "Are you here to drop something off?" Naomi offered a small smile. "I have an interview." The receptionist blinked, then forced a chuckle. "You're applying here?" Naomi nodded. "For the training coordinator position." There was a beat of silence. Then the receptionist leaned into her headset and whispered, "Yeah, I've got someone here. No, I don't think she's a fit. Trust me, you'll want to see this." Minutes later, Naomi was ushered into a white-walled conference room with a single chair and no refreshments. The HR associate, Alana, walked in with a clipboard and a smirk that barely tried to hide itself. "You're Naomi Nguyen?" Naomi nodded again. "You do realize this is Hale Corp, right? We don't usually hire people who look like they just stepped off a city bus." Naomi's fingers tightened in her lap, but her face remained calm. "I came prepared to work, not impress." Alana rolled her eyes. "Confidence is cute, but your background is, well, let's just say unconventional." She stood up. "We'll be in touch." As Naomi walked out, the whispering followed her like perfume. Too quiet to quote, too loud to ignore. But she didn't stumble. She walked past the designer handbags, the polished floors, and the stairs full of judgment, as if every person there had already decided she didn't belong. What none of them knew, as she exited the glass tower and walked toward the nearby coffee shop for her usual $2 black coffee, was that she'd walked through that building many times before, only not through the front, not as herself, not for this purpose. Because Naomi wasn't just here for a job. She was here to expose something, and someone. Her first day began at 8 a.m. sharp. Naomi arrived 10 minutes early, clutching a modest canvas tote with a worn notebook and a metal flask. No one greeted her. The HR assistant, Alana, who had conducted the cold interview, handed her a basic ID badge without looking up from her phone and gestured toward a cubicle in the far back, next to the copier. "Temporary station," she said with a sigh. "You're here to assist the training team. Don't get in the way." Naomi sat down in silence, the air around her thick with tension and perfume. Her neighboring co-workers barely glanced over. One rolled her eyes. The other whispered behind a coffee mug, "Who still wears flats with rubber soles?" Within an hour, Naomi was sent to fetch paper, refill toner, and organize 10 years of unfiled binders. "You're the new assistant, right?" said a woman named Kendra from training, waving her long acrylic nails dismissively. "Make yourself useful. I need coffee, black, no sugar. You might want to write that down." Naomi looked at her without blinking. "I'll remember." She returned a few minutes later with the coffee, still hot, and slid it onto Kendra's desk. Kendra looked up in mock surprise. Didn't expect that to happen without spelling it out twice. You're better trained than you look. By lunch, Naomi had been assigned the job of restocking snacks, organizing the supply closet, and sitting in on meetings, but only to take notes. In the break room, as she quietly ate her homemade sandwich, a group of associates burst into laughter just outside the door. One of them mimicked her voice. "I came to work, not to impress," followed by snorts and cackles. Another chimed in, "Do you think she even knows what department she's in?" The third, a young man with too much hair gel and too little self-awareness, added, "Honestly, if she ends up staying, I might just quit out of embarrassment." Naomi listened. She always did. But she never reacted. Not yet. At 3 p.m., she was asked to help set up a workshop room for a training seminar. The lead trainer, Fiona, waved her over without even making eye contact. "Wipe down the chairs. The CEO might stop by, though I doubt it. He only comes to the floor when he's looking to fire someone." Naomi glanced toward the front of the room. A golden nameplate above the podium read, "Julian Hale, Chairman and CEO." She stared at it for a second too long. "You'll never get near that guy," Fiona scoffed. "He only breathes designer air." Naomi simply nodded. "So I've heard." That evening, as the office emptied out and the lights dimmed, Naomi stayed behind to finish organizing leftover files no one else had touched in months. As she reached for the last drawer, a small photograph slipped out and landed near her feet. It was old, slightly faded, but unmistakable. Julian Hale, smiling, arm around a woman in a beige blouse. Her blouse. She slid the photo into her pocket and exhaled slowly. They wouldn't recognize her from back then. They hadn't even tried to. But they would. Very soon. Wednesday morning began with a storm, the kind that soaked sidewalks and ruined suede heels. Naomi walked into the office dripping rainwater, clutching her tote to her chest. As usual, no one offered a towel or a greeting. Her cubicle had a sticky note stuck to the monitor. "Clean up the conference room before 9. Don't mess it up, Kay." She didn't flinch. She never did. By mid-morning, the office buzzed with low conversation, none of it about business. It started when someone from accounting saw Naomi enter the executive elevator. "Isn't that off limits?" whispered Jared from logistics. "That's only for C-levels and their assistants." "Maybe she got lost," said another. "Maybe she's not as lost as we think," said a third, with a tone that wasn't quite joking. But the whispers didn't end there. Someone caught her exiting the elevator on the 40th floor. The top floor. The CEO's floor. What was she doing up there? "I bet she's sleeping with someone. She probably just got lost again." The theories flew fast, sharp, and careless. In truth, Naomi had stepped onto that floor because she knew exactly where the CEO's assistant kept the old marketing archives, and she needed one report no one else could find. But no one asked. No one cared except one. Layla, a quiet intern 2 desks down from Naomi, had noticed something that morning. Naomi had dropped her keychain by accident. Layla picked it up and saw the initials NHJ engraved into the metal. Hale's wife's name, she remembered from an old headline, was Naomi Harper. Layla didn't say a word, but that afternoon, while helping Naomi reorganize binders, she asked softly, "Do you like it here?" Naomi smiled gently. "It's a complicated question." "I don't think you're who you say you are," Layla whispered. Naomi's hands paused, then resumed. "I'm exactly who I say I am. I just haven't said everything yet." Layla looked away, unsure what that meant, but certain it wasn't nothing. Meanwhile, in the HR office, Alana had begun to feel uneasy. The gossip about Naomi using backdoor influence to get hired was growing. She couldn't afford scrutiny. Not with her own secrets buried in performance files she had doctored to cover favoritism and petty rejections. At 4:45 p.m., just before the day ended, an internal email pinged the entire HR floor. "Julian Hale will be on site. Friday. Floor inspection. Full compliance is expected." Alana's heart stopped. Fiona, the trainer, gasped. "He never visits. Why now?" "Someone probably messed something up," someone muttered. Kendra sipped her drink. "My money's on the new girl. There's something off about her." Alana looked up from her screen and said flatly, "Whatever it is, let's make sure she's gone before he arrives." But Naomi had already seen the email, and she wasn't going anywhere. Alana Nguyen had worked her way up in Hale Corp not through brilliance, but through precision, the kind of ruthless efficiency that made her feared and not respected. She wore confidence like a weapon and curated her power carefully, forging alliances, cutting threats, and most of all, protecting her proximity to Julian Hale. She wasn't just HR director. She was once the woman Julian dated before the world knew he'd married in secret. It hadn't ended well, and it wasn't because he left her. It was because he moved on to someone no one in this company ever got to see, someone no one recognized, until now. The more Alana watched Naomi, the more her stomach twisted. There was something too composed in that girl's silence, something too familiar in her restraint. The clothes were modest, the posture deferent, but the gaze, it held something old, something dangerous. That evening, Alana pulled up the hiring logs. Naomi Harper Nguyen. The name had slipped under her radar, buried in a wave of temp recruits during restructuring. Alana cursed under her breath. She opened the archived wedding press photos, long forgotten, blurry from a distance. The bride's face had been barely visible behind a veil, but now, side by side with Naomi's ID photo, the resemblance was no longer ignorable. Panic pricked her throat. She couldn't be sure, not yet, but she couldn't risk being wrong either. At 8:00 a.m. the next morning, she summoned Naomi under the pretense of HR compliance review. Naomi entered the glass office without hesitation, sitting across from Alana with her hands folded neatly. "Is there an issue?" Alana offered a thin smile. "We've been reviewing new hire feedback. Some team members say you've been bypassing protocol." "Such as?" Naomi asked calmly. "Using executive elevators, appearing on floors above your clearance." "I wasn't aware curiosity was against the rules," Naomi replied, voice even. "Unless Hale Corp no longer values initiative." Alana's smile faded. "It's not your job to be initiative-driven. It's your job to follow directions." Naomi leaned forward slightly. "And yet, I find myself solving problems no one else wants to fix. You assigned me to the training department, but they've asked me to lead next week's orientation. Should I say no?" Alana's jaw clenched. "You're here on probation. Let's not confuse survival with progress." Naomi nodded slowly. "Duly noted." She stood, but before exiting, paused by the glass door. "You seem anxious about Mr. Hale's visit tomorrow. Should I be concerned too?" Alana stared at her. "If I were you," she said sharply, "I'd take tomorrow off." Naomi's lips curved into the faintest smile. "And miss all the excitement?" She left without another word. Alana stared after her, the air around her thick with a fear she didn't yet know how to name. Not fear of being fired, but fear of being exposed. Because if Naomi was who she feared, then every cruel word, every policy bent to serve her own ego, every dismissed resume, every insult passed as protocol, was about to be judged by the one person who had more power than Julian himself, his wife. The night before the CEO's visit, the office was quiet, desks abandoned, computer screens asleep, the fluorescent lights above flickering in faint blue pulses. Naomi sat alone in the training room, the space that had become her sanctuary and her battlefield. In front of her was a folder. Inside it, screenshots, emails, audio recordings, every backhanded comment. Every task was pushed onto her desk without recognition. Every moment of humiliation cataloged without malice, just precision. She had never meant to come here and play detective. But once the game started, silence became complicity, and she had never been good at being silent for long. As she closed the folder, the reflection in the dark glass across the room shifted. Julian stepped out of the hallway shadows, his blazer slung over one shoulder, his shirt sleeves rolled up. "You never could sleep before a reckoning?" he said quietly. Naomi didn't flinch. "Neither could you." He walked over, picked up the folder, and glanced at a few pages. "I told you this would be difficult." "I didn't come to be coddled," she replied. "I came to see who they really are." Julian sat on the table beside her. "And what do you see?" Naomi turned to face him, her voice steady. "People who love power more than people. Leaders who confuse cruelty with competence. And a woman in HR who still thinks she owns this company through memory." Julian exhaled slowly. "I should have removed her years ago." "It wasn't your job to," Naomi said. "It was mine." There had been a time when Naomi had lived in this very tower, long before anyone in the HR department knew her name. Back then, she was the girl Julian met on a red-eye flight, the stranger who offered him a tissue when he coughed blood into his hands during a panic attack. He had been in disguise then, trying to escape the pressure of his own empire. She never asked him what he did, just listened as if his breathless rambling mattered. 3 months later, they were married in a courthouse with no photographers and no press. Not because they were hiding, but because they wanted something real before the world diluted it. But real love always invites real tests. And now, here they were. "I'm not here to destroy your company," Naomi said. "I'm here to clean the rot from its walls." Julian looked at her the way someone looks at a storm they don't dare stop. "Then tomorrow," he said, "I'll watch you do it." As he left the room, Naomi stood alone again, her reflection now sharper in the glass. She touched the old ID badge clipped to her chest, the one marked probationary staff, and then reached into her bag and pulled out another one, sleek, silver, with the Hale Corp insignia and a title that read, Naomi Harper Hale, Executive Advisor to the CEO. She slipped it into her pocket. Tomorrow, they would learn who she was, and this time, they wouldn't forget. The office buzzed with artificial calm the morning Julian Hale arrived. Desks were spotless. Dress codes were over-enforced. Smiles stretched wider than usual, but cracked at the edges. Fiona rehearsed her team's greetings like soldiers preparing for inspection. Kendra touched up her lipstick every 10 minutes, and Alana, HR queen in crisis, pushed a fake agenda into every email chain she could control. Naomi arrived without a word, hair tied back, still in her plain beige blouse and navy slacks. No one acknowledged her. Some even rolled their eyes as she passed. "She won't last the week," someone whispered. "Especially now." At 10 a.m. Sharp, the elevator chimed and Julian Hale stepped onto the 23rd floor. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A thin layer of panic swept through the air like static. He wore a crisp charcoal suit, no tie, and a watch worth more than half the employees' annual salaries combined. He didn't speak right away, just looked at the walls, the people, the posture of silence around him. Then, "Let's begin," he said simply. He asked for reports, asked random staff members what they thought needed improvement. Most stammered through rehearsed answers. Only Layla, the intern, dared say, "I think the culture here could be kinder." Julian raised an eyebrow, nodded, and moved on. By noon, he asked to see the training department. Fiona beamed, guiding him to the newly cleaned seminar room. "This is where we mold the next leaders of Hale Corp," she said proudly. "Naomi!" She barked toward the hallway, snapping her fingers. "Bring the orientation materials!" Naomi entered calmly, arms full of folders and booklets she had spent hours updating. As she placed them on the table, Fiona leaned toward Julian. "She's new, still learning, bit unpolished." Julian didn't respond. He just looked at Naomi, expression unreadable. She offered a slight nod. He gave nothing back. Not yet. After a few more rooms and more curated smiles, Julian finally asked for one last thing. "I want to speak with the probationary hires, alone." That was the crack no one expected. In the quiet room, Naomi sat with 3 other temps. One looked terrified. Another was visibly shaking. The third, Layla, held Naomi's hand beneath the table. Julian stood before them. "I've been told this company upholds excellence," he began, "that we hire the best, treat them with respect, give them space to grow. But I've learned that isn't always true." He looked directly at Naomi. "Do you feel supported here?" The room froze. Naomi held his gaze. "By some, not by most." "Can you elaborate?" Julian asked, voice low. Naomi looked down, then reached into her folder and slid forward a USB stick. "I documented everything, the comments, the mistreatment, the bias, not for revenge, but to show you the gaps between your vision and their reality." Julian took the USB. "Thank you." The door opened. Alana appeared flustered. "Sir, if you need anything further, I need everyone in the main conference room," he interrupted, turning without even looking at her. Now, the setup was complete. The traps they laid for Naomi had turned. The stage was no longer theirs. The storm had just begun. The main conference room was packed. Managers, assistants, HR leads, and even interns were lined along the walls. The air smelled like tension and perfume. Everyone whispered variations of the same question. Why had the CEO called this meeting? At the head of the table, Julian Hale stood with his sleeves rolled and no smile on his face. "Thank you all for being here on short notice," he began, voice firm but controlled. "Today's not about performance metrics. It's about people." Some chuckled nervously, others fidgeted. Alana adjusted her blazer and forced a smile, trying to read his tone. Julian clicked the remote in his hand. A video began to play on the large monitor behind him. It started with Fiona tossing files at Naomi's desk without looking at her. Then it shifted to Kendra snapping her fingers, asking Naomi to fetch coffee with the exact phrase, "Try not to spill it this time, darling." Then Alana's voice. "Let's not confuse survival with progress." Gasps broke the silence. Faces turned pale. Fiona looked like she might faint. Kendra visibly recoiled. Alana tried to speak, but Julian raised a hand. "That footage," he said coldly, "was compiled by someone who understood this company better than most of you do." A hush fell across the room as Naomi walked in from the back, wearing the same plain beige blouse, but this time with a different badge clipped to her chest. Naomi Harper Hale, executive advisor to the CEO. The silence cracked into disbelief. A few mouths fell open. Others looked away in shame. Julian stepped beside her and took her hand. "This is my wife," he said, his voice unwavering, "and she walked into this building to see if the values we print on banners actually exist between these walls." He looked directly at Alana. She was humiliated, dismissed, mocked, not because she failed to perform, but because she didn't perform your idea of status. Alana's lips parted, but no words came. Her knees locked. "I hired many of you because I believed you understood people," Julian continued. "But today, I've learned you only understand power." He turned to Naomi. "Do you want to say anything?" Naomi looked around the room, not with vengeance, but with something colder, clarity. "I didn't come here to punish anyone," she said softly. "I came here hoping to be proven wrong. I wasn't." Her eyes landed on Fiona, then Kendra, then Alana. "You didn't fail me. You failed every woman who walks in here without heels and a last name that opens doors." No one dared speak. No one dared move. Julian finally broke the silence. "Effective immediately, Alana Nguyen is suspended pending review. Fiona and Kendra, your contracts are terminated. As for everyone else, how you treated her will be how this company treats you going forward." As he and Naomi left the room, the door clicked behind them like a gavel, and the empire they thought they controlled slipped quietly through their fingers. The days that followed weren't loud. They were hauntingly quiet. No more fake smiles. No more forced laughter near the pantry. No more fingers snapping toward Naomi like she was furniture. Fiona's desk stood empty, her nameplate removed. Kendra's mug had vanished from the sink, and Alana's glass-walled office was now locked, the blinds drawn like a tomb. In their place, uncertainty, accountability, and something the office hadn't felt in years, humility. Naomi didn't flaunt her position. She arrived each morning in the same understated outfits, nodded to people who dared look her in the eye, and continued her work. Only now with authority, she never had to raise her voice to use. People noticed, especially the younger staff. Layla, the quiet intern who once sat beside Naomi in silence, now followed her into meetings, mentored personally, and her voice was invited where it used to be overlooked. Some employees tried to apologize. Timid, "I didn't mean it," and "it was just office culture," filtered in like whispers, too late to matter. Naomi never scolded them. She simply said, "Change it now, or leave it behind." One afternoon, as the new training program was being designed under her supervision, Naomi stood in front of a group of junior staff and said, "This company is not built on titles. It's built on how we treat the person who brings coffee, the person who files your reports, the one whose name you don't remember because you never asked." Her words didn't echo. They sank. Meanwhile, Julian quietly made structural changes. Leadership roles were reshuffled. A new code of conduct was distributed, signed by every department head with a clause. No one is above decency, and no one beneath respect. Alana was never seen again. Rumor said she tried to send a private apology to Julian, but it was returned unopened. Others claimed she'd taken a job overseas, where titles still mattered. But no one really cared. The empire she tried to guard with manipulation had turned to ash the moment the truth stepped into daylight. In the same conference room where Naomi once stood with her head down, she now led strategy sessions, her voice calm, her decisions razor sharp. People no longer saw her as the girl in the beige blouse. They saw her as a leader forged not by privilege, but by choice. She could have walked in on day one and demanded the world. Instead, she walked through fire to prove whether it was worth saving. Now that she knew it was, she was rebuilding it, brick by honest brick. The elevator chimed as Naomi stepped onto the 40th floor, not as an intruder, not as a probationary hire, but as a leader with a seat at the table. The receptionist stood and gave a soft smile. "Mrs. Hale," she greeted, but Naomi shook her head gently. Just Naomi. That name alone now carried the weight of transformation. The boardroom was already full when she entered. Senior partners lined along the glass wall, portfolios open, pens ready. But silence fell the moment she walked in. Julian didn't introduce her. He didn't need to. Everyone knew who she was now. Not because of a headline or a wedding photo, but because of what she'd rebuilt in less than a month. She took her place beside him. Not behind him, not beneath him, but beside him, where her presence redrew the entire dynamic of the room. That morning, Naomi presented the new Hale Corp ethics framework. She spoke without slides, without fanfare, just clarity. What we sell to the world means nothing if what we protect inside these walls is arrogance, she said. Respect isn't an HR policy. It's a leadership requirement. Some board members shifted in their seats uncomfortable. Others nodded solemnly. Julian remained quiet, arms folded, pride hidden behind the stillness of his gaze. After the meeting, as the room cleared, one senior partner lingered. An older woman who had once silently judged Naomi's resume now extended her hand. "You've changed this place," she said. "No," Naomi replied with a small smile. "It changed itself when it stopped pretending." Later that afternoon, Naomi walked through the lower floors, pausing to speak to staff by name, remembering birthdays and asking about family. Some of the same employees who once mocked her now stood taller just to speak to her, and not out of fear, but respect. Layla, now promoted to junior associate, handed Naomi a folder. "I found this in one of Alana's old drawers," she said. It was Naomi's original application, rejected twice before it slipped through. A red note was scribbled across the top. Not a culture fit. Naomi stared at it, then smiled. "They were right," she said. "I wasn't made to fit this culture. I was made to change it." That night, as the city lights blinked outside their penthouse windows, Julian poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Naomi. "You were right to walk in through the front door," he said, "even when they slammed it in your face." Naomi took a sip. "It had to be that way," she murmured. "Otherwise, they'd never learn what they needed to." He sat beside her, their hands brushing. "I don't think they'll ever forget," he said. Naomi looked at him, eyes clear and steady. "Good," she replied. "Because I didn't come here to be remembered as your wife. I came to remind them what leadership really looks like." And in that moment, the quiet woman in the beige blouse, once invisible, once mocked, once erased, sat taller than any crown could ever elevate her. She didn't wear a title. She became one. The Hale Corp annual gala was a spectacle of excess, gold chandeliers, crystal flutes, velvet gowns. The elite arrived in black SUVs, heels tapping marble floors, flashes from press cameras bouncing off diamond earrings. Everyone whispered about the same thing. Julian Hale would appear tonight. But more than that, they whispered about her. The woman no one recognized, the wife in plain clothes, the girl who made half the exec team disappear. At 8:47 p.m., though the ballroom hush shifted into a wave of breathless stares as Naomi stepped in. No crown, no train, just an elegant cream-colored dress that skimmed the floor, hair in a low knot, neckline simple. But she didn't need sparkle. The room dimmed for her. Julian walked beside her, arm gently offered, not as a prop, but as a partner. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their entrance said everything. You judged her. You mocked her. You tried to shrink her. And she still rose. Heads turned. Some guests smiled in apology. Others looked away. A few tried to approach. Naomi was gracious, polite, but distant. Because she hadn't come for revenge. She came to reclaim what had always been hers, dignity. The host took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Hale." The applause was scattered at first, then louder, growing with the sound of realization. Naomi walked up to the podium. She paused, then said, "There was a time I stood in your offices and no one saw me. There was a time I was asked to clean your coffee cups while holding 2 degrees and a business plan. There was a time you laughed." Her voice didn't shake. "But I never needed you to see me. I only needed you to watch yourselves." A beat. Silence. This company was built by a man who believed in starting from the ground, but it will only survive if it remembers the ground is where roots grow, not where you bury the inconvenient. And with that, she stepped back. No mic drop, no dramatic exit, just silence and awe. Later, on the balcony, Julian held her hand. "You know," he said, "this wasn't the wedding I gave you." Naomi smiled. "No," she said, "but it's the one they'll never forget." Below, a limo pulled away with Fiona inside, her face pressed against the glass, silent. At the gala bar, Alana's replacement took notes from Naomi's speech, planning to open with it at the Monday leadership orientation. And in that building, where once her name was scribbled over and tossed aside, now her signature hung on every new hire document. Her wedding was never about flowers or cameras. It was about who would still stand beside her after the masks were gone. And she didn't just walk down an aisle that night. She walked through history as herself, unashamed, undeniable, unforgettable. In a world obsessed with surface, she proved that worth cannot be worn and power cannot be faked. She walked through humiliation with her chin high, her silence louder than their laughter. And when they finally learned who she truly was, not just the billionaire's wife, but the woman who built his peace, they didn't just lose their pride. They lost the right to ever look down on anyone again. Because the crown she wore wasn't gold, it was made of grace. And now, they'll never forget the day they tried to throw the bride out of her own wedding.